As I will show in this video, both the Apple Watch Ultra and the Apple Watch Series 8 are great sleep trackers, though surprisingly the cheaper Apple Watch 8 might actually be better in some scenarios. And I know this because I went to a scientific sleep lab for 3 nights and I tested the Apple Watch Ultra and Apple Watch Series 8 on myself, but also on my friends Chris and Theresa. In this video, we're going to compare the performance of the Apple Watch Ultra and Apple Watch 8 to a scientific polysomnography device, which is actually the device that scientists use as the gold standard to track people's sleep. So if you want to know if you can trust the sleep stage tracking of the Apple Watch, this video is for you. So let's get started. Hello everyone. For those of you that are new to the channel, my name is Rob and I'm a postdoctoral scientist specializing in biological data analysis. Now, as you might know, Apple introduced their new sleep stage tracking algorithm in July of last year, and in my testing it's proven to be consistently one of the most, if not the most reliable smartwatches for sleep stage tracking. However, there are 2 limitations to my testing. First of all, the EEG device I use as a reference is not perfect. It measures my brainwaves and eye movements similar to how a scientific polysomnography device does it, but it has fewer electrodes and they're also attached less reliably. The second limitation is that I just tested the Apple Watches on me and they could behave differently on others. This is why it was great that Professor Manuel Chabus invited me to spend 3 nights in his sleep lab in Salzburg, and I also invited my friend Theresa to come along so we would also have a female test subject. I actually tested many of my favorite sleep trackers while I was there, including a sleep tracking app developed by Professor Chabus and his team, but I'll discuss all of those in future videos. Today we'll focus on the Apple Watch Ultra and the Apple Watch 8, which have both proven to be some of the best sleep trackers in my testing, but of course we still have to see if they continue to be the best when comparing them against the scientific gold standard. Now, surprisingly, based on my results, I suspect that the Apple Watch 8 might be a better choice for some people when it comes to sleep tracking compared to the Apple Watch Ultra. But before getting to the actual results, I have to give you a bit of background on the testing. To measure your sleep stages reliably, sleep labs use what is called a polysomnography device, or in short PSG device. This basically means they measure the electrical signals of your brain, eyes, heart and muscles to get a comprehensive picture of your night. And with this data, you can then get a reliable measurement of what sleep stages you went through. Now, I could only test both the Apple Watch Ultra and Apple Watch 8 for 2 nights each. 1 night on myself and 1 night on either Theresa or Chris. Now, the reason is that I only had 3 nights in total in the sleep lab, and I of course also wanted to test other devices. However, combined with all the tests I did previously, I do believe that these results give us a comprehensive overview of the performance of Apple Watches when it comes to sleep stage tracking. So let's get started, and we're going to get started with how the Apple Watch 8 performed on me. And these are the sleep stages for the night that I wore the Apple Watch Series 8. On top here we have the sleep stages according to the polysomnography device, with the clock time along the horizontal axis and the sleep stages on the vertical axis. And on the bottom we have a similar plot, but now for the sleep stages according to the Apple Watch Series 8. And if we now mark the deep sleep as recorded by the polysomnography device in purple, we can see on the bottom that there's quite a good agreement between the Apple Watch Series 8 and the polysomnography device when it comes to deep sleep. Basically, all of the deep sleep that the PSG device detected was also detected by the Apple Watch, but the Apple Watch did detect a bit of extra deep sleep, as you can see right here, but also right here. So despite these minor extra deep sleep segments, the agreement is still quite good. Next, if we mark light sleep, in this case in cyan, we also see a quite good agreement between the Apple Watch Series 8 and the reference device. Only here later in the night that the PSG device detected me as being mostly awake, whereas the Apple Watch still detected some extra light sleep, but still overall the agreement is not bad at all. REM sleep, which are marked in red, also agreed quite well. Now the last 3 REM sleep segments agree almost perfectly, however the first shorter REM sleep segment is missed by the Apple Watch. This is also what we've seen for many of the other smartwatches in my testing, where I have a short REM sleep segment in the beginning of my night that's tricky for them to pick up on. This also means that we can see most but not all of my sleep cycles based on just the data from the Apple Watch Series 8. Now you go through roughly 4 to 6 sleep cycles each night, each one starting with light and deep sleep marked in blue, and each one ending in REM sleep marked in red. And as you can see, I likely had 1, 2, 3, 4 complete sleep cycles this night. And we are able to see much of it based on just the data from the Apple Watch, but this first part would be difficult to see. Now, awake time detection is also quite decent for the Apple Watch Series 8. And here I marked all the awake time according to the PSG device in green. As you can see, the PSG device detects a lot of very short awakenings, many of which will not be moments where I was fully conscious and awake. I can imagine that Apple intentionally doesn't show these short awake moments, even if they are able to detect them. First of all, because it would be difficult for many people to interpret. And second, it might be something that people would be concerned with. Now, if we look at the longest awake moment right here, we do see that the Apple Watch 8 detected this. Now, missing many of these short awake moments is not something I'm really concerned with. What we did see when we were looking at light sleep is that here near the end of the night, the Apple Watch detects some extra light sleep, whereas the PSG device says I'm already mostly awake. So the Apple Watch detected a bit less awake time here, but still overall this doesn't look bad at all. However, let's now express this in percentages so we can see how good the agreement actually is. And here you can see an overview of the sleep test results. On top are the sleep stages as recorded by the PSG device, and on the left are the sleep stages as recorded by the Apple Watch Series 8. Now we want to see how close the predictions of the Apple Watch are to those of the PSG device. Each column here sums to 100%, meaning that we can see what percentage of each of the sleep stages according to the PSG device was predicted as each sleep stage by the Apple Watch Series 8. And if they perfectly agree, all values on the diagonal should be 100%. First of all, we see that about 90% of what was deep sleep according to the reference device was also detected as deep sleep by the Apple Watch. This of course matches with what we saw for the individual nights, and this is very good. If there was any disagreement, the Apple Watch predicted light sleep instead at about 10%, and as we saw before, it also predicted a bit of extra deep sleep. Now, light sleep agreement is also very good at about 85%. Now, with most disagreement being with deep sleep. Now, this is the extra deep sleep that we saw that the Apple Watch Series 8 predicted, and in reality, this was actually light sleep. REM sleep agreement is also very good at 84%. However, we did see that the Apple Watch missed my first short REM sleep segment, meaning we couldn't see all the sleep cycles. Still, overall, this isn't bad at all. And if it did predict something different when I had REM sleep, it predicted light sleep instead. Finally, awake detection was also pretty good at about 70%. However, as we saw, it didn't detect many of these short awake moments that the PSG reference device did detect. However, I honestly suspect this might be a feature and not a bug in Apple's algorithm. Now, most disagreement was with light sleep, and this makes some sense, of course, since this is the closest sleep stage to being awake. So this is actually looking very good for the Apple Watch Series 8, but does its more expensive brother, the Apple Watch Ultra, do just as well? Let's have a look. Now, these are the sleep stages for the night that I wore the Apple Watch Ultra. So this is a similar plot to before, with the sleep stages according to the reference device on top and the results according to the Apple Watch Ultra on the bottom. Now, first of all, if we look at deep sleep, which is marked in purple right here, we see quite a good agreement between the Apple Watch Ultra and the reference device. Similar to what we saw for the Apple Watch Series 8, basically all of the deep sleep detected by the reference device is also detected by the Apple Watch Ultra, but again, it does detect some extra deep sleep, as you can see right here and right here. So there's overall a good agreement, but it both in the beginning of the night and at the end of the night detected some extra deep sleep. Now, light sleep detection, which is marked in cyan, was also pretty good, though we do see slightly more disagreement now compared to what we saw for the Apple Watch Series 8, but this is a slight difference. There are some moments where the reference device detected light sleep, but then the Apple Watch Ultra detected either REM sleep or it would detect deep sleep, as you can see right here or right here. Still, again, overall, this doesn't look bad at all. And REM sleep, which is marked in red, is also showing a pretty good agreement. Most of the REM sleep segments detected by the gold standard were also detected by the Apple Watch Ultra. But we again see, and this is quite typical, that this first short REM sleep segment is not detected by the Apple Watch Ultra. This also means that we have a similar sleep cycle detection performance compared to what we saw for the Apple Watch Series 8. The Apple Watch can detect all sleep cycles except for the first one. Now, during this night, I likely had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 complete sleep cycles, and based on the Apple Watch Ultra's data, I can detect the later ones, but not the first ones. And interestingly, awake moment detection also shows similar patterns to what we saw for the Apple Watch Series 8. I had many of these short awakenings according to the reference device, and this is not something that the Apple Watch Ultra detects. But again, I think this was done intentionally by Apple. Still, the awake moments before falling asleep and those after waking up agree very well. Though I have to say there is some disagreement here near the end, where I was half asleep and half awake, and the exact awake and asleep moments were different between the reference device and the Apple Watch. Still, it doesn't look too bad for the Apple Watch, though awake detection might be its weakest point if you're also interested in these short awake moments. Let's now again do some calculations and get the actual percentage of agreement for each of the sleep stages. That is displayed here in a similar plot to before, but we're now looking at the agreement of the Apple Watch Ultra with the gold standard reference device. First of all, we see that about 93% of what the PSG device recorded as being deep sleep was also marked as deep sleep by the Apple Watch Ultra, so that's pretty good. And any deep sleep that wasn't detected correctly by the Apple Watch Ultra was detected as being light sleep instead, similar to what we saw for the Apple Watch Series 8. Though you should remember that the Apple Watch Ultra tended to detect some extra deep sleep compared to the reference, and you cannot see that in this number right here. Now, light sleep agreement was also pretty good at about 81%, and most disagreement was with deep sleep. Now, this is in fact that extra deep sleep that I mentioned before that the Apple Watch detected, which was in fact light sleep. Now, REM sleep agreement is also not bad at all at about 71%. Now, we did see that the Apple Watch Ultra missed this first short REM sleep segment, similar to what the Apple Watch 8 also did, which meant we couldn't see all the sleep cycles. And all of the mispredicted REM sleep was predicted as being light sleep instead by the Apple Watch Ultra at about 30%. Now, awake detection agreed pretty okay, though not quite as good as the other sleep stages, with a total agreement of about 60%. And if it did disagree, this was mostly confused with light sleep, similar to what we saw for the Apple Watch Series 8. So these seem like pretty good results for both Apple Watches, but of course we also want to know if the performance is similar on other people besides me. And before we get to that, I want to see how these results compare to the results I showed you in the past. That way we can get a first glimpse as to how the Apple Watch compares to other devices. Let's have a look. This graph shows an overview of the agreement of different watches and trackers with the normal reference EEG device I used to test them. Along the horizontal axis, we have the average agreement over the 4 individual sleep stages, and on the vertical axis, we have the agreement of the worst sleep stage. Now, the better the agreement, the more to the top right the device is. And as you can see, the devices with the best agreement so far were different Apple Watches. In this case, the Apple Watch Series 7, Series 8, the Apple Watch SE, and the Apple Watch Ultra. And we can also see that the 8 Sleep Pod 3 did really well. Now, other good devices include different Fitbits, the Google Pixel Watch, Whoop straps, and the Withings Sleep Analyzer, though their agreement is not quite as good as what we saw for the Apple Watches. But of course, all these results are based on comparisons to the other reference device. But if we now plot the results based on the test I showed you in this video, in this plot, we indeed see that the Apple Watches are in roughly the same region as they were in my previous testing. So in red, here are the results for the Apple Watch Series 8 and the Apple Watch Ultra based on the scientific gold standard I showed you right here. And all the others are based on a comparison to the Dream 2 EEG headband as a reference. So even though I used a better reference device for looking at the Apple Watch Ultra and Apple Watch 8 here in red, we can see it's in a similar area as where the Apple Watches were previously as well. So this is not definitive, but this is a good hint that the Apple Watches are some of the best sleep stage trackers out there. Now, these results seem to indicate that both the Apple Watch Series 8 and the Apple Watch Ultra are really good sleep stage trackers. At first glance, the Series 8 actually seems to do a tiny bit better, though this might just be random variation given that we only have one out of data to work with. But let's now see if the Apple Watches perform just as well on Chris and Theresa. However, first a quick side note. If you're interested in the latest updates on the wearables I'm testing, I'm planning to start back up with my newsletter and posting more off-the-cuff things on my Instagram and my YouTube Shorts channel. So if you're interested in any of those are linked below. Of course, you would also make me really happy and it will help my efforts if you subscribe to this YouTube channel and like this video. But of course, this is totally up to you. Now, enough self-promotion. Let's take a look at the performance of the Apple Watches on Chris and Theresa. Let's start with the performance of the Apple Watch Series 8 on Chris, which he tested for a single night. Now, this is a similar plot to before, with the polysomnography device results on top and the Apple Watch Series 8 results on the bottom. First of all, the deep sleep agreement seems to be really good, as you can see marked here in purple. Basically, all of the deep sleep segments that Chris had were also detected by the Apple Watch Series 8, with some minor deviations right here, and right here. But overall, honestly, this is quite good. And I find it interesting because Chris has a different sleep pattern than me. I tend to have all my deep sleep here in the beginning of the night, but he has a lot in the middle of the night, and the Apple Watch 8 is able to pick up on this. Now, the same goes for light sleep agreement, which is marked here in cyan. This matches very well between the Apple Watch Series 8 and the reference device. Now, when I mark the REM sleep as detected by the reference device in red, you see there's also a good agreement with the Apple Watch. The location of the segments agrees basically perfectly, and only the length differs between the Apple Watch and the reference device. Still, overall, I'm quite happy with this. What I find really interesting is that Chris doesn't seem to have the classic pattern of sleep cycles, or at least the duration is a bit different. Still, we are able to see the same patterns based on the data from the Apple Watch and the PCG reference device. Finally, the awake time detection, which I marked here in green, also agrees very well, even a bit better than when I tested it on me. Now, Chris also had some of these short awakenings that I also had, but interestingly in this case, the Apple Watch picked up on many of these short awake moments as well. For me, it tended to miss most, if not all of them, but for Chris, just over half of them were detected. And if we now look at the actual percentages of agreement between the reference device and the Apple Watch Series 8, we see that these also reflect a good match between the two. Again, we want the values on the diagonal to be as close to 100% as possible. And in this case, the agreement of deep sleep, light sleep, and REM sleep is all in the low to mid 80% for all these 3 stages, which is really good. And actually, awake detection also agrees very well at about 78%. This again shows a really good overall performance of the Apple Watch Series 8 when it comes to sleep stage tracking. Now, I'm happy and also slightly relieved to see that the results we've discussed seem to match very well with the results I've shared previously on this channel. However, so far we've just looked at the performance of the Apple Watch on me and on Chris, and we're both men. However, do Apple Watches have the same performance on women? To test that, I had Theresa wear the Apple Watch Ultra, which is the largest and heaviest Apple Watch out there. And this is where we see the first really surprising results. On top are the polysomnography results for Theresa, and on the bottom the matching Apple Watch Ultra measurements. And if we now mark the deep sleep according to the reference device in purple, we can see there's now a big deep sleep disagreement between the reference device and the Apple Watch Ultra. The Apple Watch Ultra detected almost no deep sleep for Theresa for this night, whereas the PSG device detected quite some deep sleep. I did notice in the morning that the Apple Watch Ultra was quite loose on Theresa's wrist, which might be the reason for why it performed worse. Given the size and weight of the Apple Watch Ultra and the fact that Theresa has a smaller wrist size than me, the watch likely shifted on the wrist, preventing the Apple Watch from getting good measurements. But no matter the reason, we do see poor deep sleep agreement right here. Now this actually resulted in the Apple Watch Ultra detecting far too much light sleep for this night. So the light sleep according to the reference device is marked in cyan right here, but as you can see, the Apple Watch Ultra detected far more light sleep. So it seems that most of the misclassified deep sleep was marked as light sleep by the Apple Watch Ultra. Now, interestingly, REM sleep still agreed very well, with most REM sleep segments detected quite accurately. Again though, we see this first short REM sleep segment was missed, similar to what we saw from my night with both the Apple Watch Ultra and Apple Watch Series 8. So this also means that despite having poor deep sleep detection, we're still able to see most of the sleep cycles based on just the data from the Apple Watch Ultra. And finally, awake time detection showed very similar patterns to what we saw when I tested the Apple Watch Ultra on myself. Many of these very short awake moments that the reference device detects are not detected by the Apple Watch Ultra. However, I still suspect that many of these are intentionally left out by Apple. Now, the first longer awake moment was detected right here, but all the other short awake moments were not detected. And we can actually get an even better overview of those results by looking at the percentages of agreement. Again, we want the values on the diagonal to be as close to 100% as possible. And as we saw in the individual night, only a fraction of what the reference device detected as being deep sleep was also detected as being deep sleep by the Apple Watch Ultra. Most of what the reference device detected as being deep sleep in Theresa was detected as light sleep instead. However, when she was in fact in light sleep, the Ultra did correctly determine it was indeed light sleep most of the time. However, it just detected way too much light sleep in total. Now, both REM sleep and awake time detection were actually also pretty good as well, with an agreement of 72% and 86% respectively. Now, when it comes to REM sleep, the Ultra just missed this first short REM sleep segment, and for awake time it missed many of these short awakenings. However, for these last 2 stages, the results aren't that bad at all. So I find it really interesting to see that the Apple Watch Ultra performed quite poorly on Theresa when it comes to deep sleep detection. My main hypothesis here is that I didn't attach it tightly enough on her wrist the evening before, and given that her wrist is substantially smaller than mine, it likely shifted away from the correct position when she went to bed. However, it could also be, so this is a second reason, that the Apple Watch Ultra was calibrated to my sleep patterns and that her sleeping behavior is very different from mine. Now, these are the 2 most likely reasons, though it could have something to do with some other specific characteristics of Theresa, like a different blood flow to her arms, the temperature of her arms and hands, her gender, or any number of different things. It would actually be great to retest the Apple Watch Ultra on her at some point and to make sure it's better attached to her wrist. Still, assuming that the deviant results on Theresa is due to a poor fit on her wrist, the Apple Watch is still a great sleep tracker. However, it might mean that for some people with a smaller wrist, the Apple Watch Ultra is not the best choice. In that case, it might actually be better to choose a smaller and lighter Apple Watch, like the Apple Watch Series 8 or Apple Watch SE. Now, before I get to my final conclusions and recommendations, I do need to mention some of the limitations in this testing. First of all, I just have data for 4 nights of sleep, and for any conclusive test we need more data. Still, given the many nights I also tested the Apple Watches with an EEG device as a reference, I'm pretty confident the results are quite reliable. Second, even though I tested the Apple Watch on 3 people now instead of just on myself, the demographics are still quite limited, and it would also be good to test the Apple Watches on darker skin tones, for instance. Still, overall, the Apple Watch remains one of my top recommendations for sleep stage tracking, as long as you ensure a good fit on the wrist. For most people, I'd actually recommend the Apple Watch SE or potentially the Apple Watch Series 7, since these are not as heavy as the Apple Watch Ultra and quite a bit cheaper than both the Apple Watch Ultra and the Apple Watch Series 8, but they still have amazing performance. Now, the main issue I personally have with Apple Watches is that the health interface of the Apple Health app is not great, and I find it tricky to quickly find the data I need and to actually interpret them. It would be great if Apple could better visualize your trends and also visualize your deviations from your normal baseline. Now, there are apps out there that try to fill this gap, like the Athletic app for instance, but native support would be better. However, for general health tracking, at the moment at least, I would still recommend the Whoop Strap 4.0 and the Oura Ring 3, or as you might have seen in my recent video, the 8 Sleep Pod 3 is also a good sleep tracker with a pretty nice interface, but also a hefty price tag. Now, if you want to buy an Apple Watch, another device, or anything at all on Amazon for that matter, even something as small as toilet paper, and at the same time support the channel, there are different affiliate links in the description below that do not cost you any extra, and some even provide a discount. Now, as I mentioned, the Oura Ring and Whoop Strap are great for general health tracking, and videos on those two devices are linked right here. If, on the other hand, you want to know the best device depending on your budget, check out this video right here. Now, many thanks to Professor Shabus and his team for their help and letting us use their sleep lab. They actually have their own sleep app called Nukua, which I'll test soon. Of course, also many thanks to Theresa and Chris, and thank you so much for watching. Catch you in the next video.